It's 5:42 a.m., 36 degrees, wind from the north cutting across the river like a blade, and I can see my breath rolling in front of my face even inside the booth because the heater gave up sometime after midnight. My name is Mason Reed, broadcasting from a low cinder block station on the south edge of Council Bluffs, just across the water from Omaha. If you hear me, I'm on AM 1130 and shortwave 6.990 megahertz, and if the shortwave is too full of static, slide to 6.986 and wait for the signal to lock. If you have a red light on the hand crank radio, it's probably your batteries. Shake them. If you find this by chance, keep your radio off until the hour to save power. Then try again. I'm going to stay on as long as the diesel in the back tank lets me, and as long as the river keeps moving and the antenna doesn't ice up. The air is sharp with that smell you get when the first snow is close but not ready yet. Metal, a hint of smoke from someone's barrel stove a few blocks over, a sweetness from the bakery that used to open at 6 on dot before the ovens ran out of gas. I'm here. You're not alone. Keep breathing. If you can hear the hum, that's the inverter, not your head. If you can hear nothing at all, then it might be your own body trying to be quiet. I hear it too. I'll start at the beginning, or at least the first moment when it all felt wrong. 2 Mondays ago, 7:13 Central, a caller from Kearney told me her phone showed the same wireless alert 3 times in a row, worded almost the same each time, but with tiny changes, like someone was testing a script and forgot to shut off the live feed. The first one said there was a regional infrastructure anomaly. The second said grid reliability event. The third used plain words, power cuts and fuel shortages likely today. She read them to me slow, because her screen froze and she wrote them down before it died. I laughed on air, not because it was funny, but because that kind of wording belongs on a planning worksheet, not in a message to a mother who still had her hair wet and a kid yelling for breakfast. She asked me if she should top off. I told her yes. I told everyone yes. That afternoon, I saw the line at the Casey's on West Broadway, stretching past the pumps and into the street. People weren't honking. They were just looking at each other like they didn't know if this was the last normal thing they'd ever do. By sunset, the fuel trucks were nowhere, and the store manager said the card machines were timing out even on cash sales, which made no sense. But nothing has made sense since that morning except the cold. The next day, the traffic lights downtown flicked to flashing red and then gave up. I stood at the window here with the can of coffee grounds and watched a man in a blue pickup sit at the empty intersection until a woman in a silver sedan rolled down her window and waved him through, like this was still a place where signals lived in wires and people took turns. The banks turned their signs off and taped paper to the doors. My station phone rang so hard it sounded like it was trying to wake the dead. The calls came back to back. A nurse at Bergen Mercy saying their backup generator made a choke sound twice, then settled, then unlike any test she'd heard. A tech at the water plant saying they were running blind, which I only understood later when he explained that the sensors were spitting out numbers that didn't line up with what his eyes saw. Levels that bobbed up and down like a child playing with a float in a pool. He said you can't treat water by feel, but when the screen lies and the alarms stay quiet, you don't have a choice. The early theories from the people who still had access to those rooms said it might be a control system glitch or something pushed over the network, but the network was full of holes by then. I caught a relay from a guy outside Des Moines who said he'd been in the Guard, and the word inside some armory offices was that certain grid nodes were chattering, which is a way to say the machines were talking too much to each other and not enough to the human who needed them to hold a steady line. There was another kind of chatter, the human one, and it changed overnight. The usual noise on social feeds, cats, sports, weather fights, went quiet. Not empty. Quiet, which is worse. You know this if you've ever walked into a room just after an argument ended. That still heat, that feeling like the air is listening. Then the official accounts started posting fewer words, as if small language could make a big problem feel normal. Short posts about temporary disruptions and rebalanced loads, then nothing at all for hours that stretched into days. People tried to take pictures of the black blocks and the lit blocks to make some kind of map, and then the upload stayed stuck at 95% until the phone heated up and dimmed. A man I trust, who used to work in a data center in Papillion, told me their building lost its heartbeat for 3 minutes. His phrase. And when it came back, there were parts of the system that seemed to remember a different time than the rest. Think about that. A place with 10,000 machines, each one holding a tiny clock, and some of the clocks stepping left while others step right. He said it like he was telling me his dog barked at a wall. You can't argue with it, but you also can't live with it. By Friday, the grocery stores had a new smell. It was the mix of bleach and thaw. They dumped meat out back because the coolers were tired. The dumpsters filled fast, and then the crows came, and then the stray dogs, and then the noise of people chasing them away because even dead things draw a kind of crowd. I went on air and told people what I knew. If you're relying on city water, boil it if you can, filter it if you must, and if you have neither fire nor filter, let it settle and decant slow, because at least you'll leave some of the heavy stuff stuck to the grit at the bottom. Not perfect. Better than hope alone. I said, keep your tanks full. Keep extra cans by your bed in case you need to move at dawn. One mother called and said her kids cried when she put the water jugs in the hallway because it made the house look like a shelter. We talked until her battery died. Later that night, a silent convoy rolled across I-80, no markings, trucks with the kind of wheels that don't care about potholes. Someone in the station parking lot said the lead truck had a small blue light clipped low on the front bumper, pointed down, the kind night workers use to not wreck their night eyes. They didn't stop at the way station. No one followed them. The first broadcast that felt like a confession came from a voice that wouldn't give his name. He said he was in Lincoln, said he worked at a substation, and that he'd cut power to his own street twice in the last 3 days. Not because he wanted to, but because the instructions coming down told him that if they didn't shed load there, the line to the east would glow. He said glow like a thing you can hold, not like a warning. He said he'd never been told to do it to a neighborhood with a hospital before. He said he didn't sleep after he pressed the button because he could hear the city shrink in the dark. He said the weird part is, after you do it once, the second time is easier, and that scared him more than the dark. If you're hearing me, sir, I hope you found a quiet corner and some food that doesn't need heat. You did what they told you to do because the choice was that, or a line that might catch fire. Sometimes there are only bad doors. The panic didn't show up as a shout. It walked in quiet. People stopped making eye contact in the fuel lines. I saw children counting batteries from the bottom of a cabinet like coins saved to buy a toy. I saw a man in work boots take his cap off at the empty shelf where bread used to be, and sort of bow to it like he was saying, "Thanks for all the years you gave me." In the neighborhoods west of the river, someone drove around at night and took copper from air units, which is a thing people have always done. But now it happens while families sit in the living room and listen. There's a new sound I've learned to hear, the grinding whine of metal freeing itself from bolts under a blanket so the glow doesn't show in the street. If you hear that, don't go outside. If you have a chain, use it. Padlocks on cages were made for hard times too. People are saying martial law as if the words themselves make soldiers appear, but the uniforms I've seen are tired and thin on the ground. A roadblock appeared on the bridge for half a day and then left at dusk. The signs they left behind still say, checkpoint, but there's no one to check. You want the theories. I hear you. I'll tell you what I get, and you can judge it like a friend would. An engineer from the university got through on the shortwave 2 nights ago and said this isn't one kind of failure. He said it's like when you stack dominoes in fancy patterns, and then some kid runs through the room and sweeps his hand over half of them before you press the first one. He used plainer words than that, but that was the picture in my head. He said some of the control systems were choked by bad traffic at just the wrong time. Some were starved of good data. Some lost their time reference, which is how they know what now is. He said a lot of things still work if you can manually switch them, but the people who know how to turn those old knobs have been told to trust the new screens for 10 years, and it takes a different kind of courage to close a breaker by hand and listen for the sound that tells you you didn't just hurt a friend 100 miles away. A retired colonel I've met at the coffee shop over the years told me on the phone he thinks this is a pressure test. And then he went quiet, and then he said, or it was, and now it's the real thing. He didn't say who. He didn't say where. He did say, testing recovery speed, which sounds like language that belongs in a lab, not on a land where children ride bikes under dead streetlights. I'm going to try to rack up your call-ins before the sun is up bright enough to make shadows. If you're far away, ride the shortwave, not the AM, because the AM ground wave is short on good days, and these are not good days. Keep it tight and clear, and say your name and city. If your hands shake, put the radio on the table and lean in close. If you don't want to say where you are, make one up. Safety first. We all understand. This is Sarah from North Platte. She said her dad was a ham for 40 years, and when he died, she kept his gear in a Rubbermaid bin under the stairs because it smelled like him. She pulled it out 2 nights ago and a cord had melted to the side of a transformer, and she had to cut it free with a razor blade from a craft kit, and then she rewired it with the last good lamp cord in the house. She said her husband laughed softly when it worked, which might be the only laugh they've had all week. She said she heard a man speak Spanish on 40 meters, and she cried because it was a normal voice in a sea of ghosts. She said the water coming out of her tap tasted like a penny. I told her to let it run for 15 minutes if she has the pressure to spare, not because it fixes the source, but because it pulls whatever's sitting stale in the line. I told her to fill a 5-gallon bucket and sit it in the corner with a towel over the top. I told her the first glass out of a bucket is the one that tastes like plastic, so pour it out on a plant. She said there are no plants anymore because they brought them inside and the cold still got them. She asked if it's wrong to miss the sound of a fridge. I said, no. Here's Jonah from Fremont, a voice I know from the station break contests we used to run for fun. He said the bridge there is holding, but the cars are fewer and the bikes are more. He said he saw a stop at a side street where a boy with a backpack and bright shoes stood with his thumb pointed sideways like he was trying to remember which way to flag a ride. Jonah said he pulled over and asked where the boy was going, and the boy said east like it was a person. Jonah said he gave him an orange and sent him back home because there are too many people on the road who live on the road now, and a child is a light and a target. He said, maybe he made the wrong call. I said maybe he did the only thing he could. If that boy's mother hears this, Jonah is the one with the blue baseball cap who smells like diesel and coffee and thinks he saved your son's life. He probably did. There's a strange way the city sounds now around noon. It used to be that lunch had a rumble, traffic and doors and people counting tips in the back of a grill. Now noon sounds like morning did before. Quiet. And the new kind of busy arrives when the sun drops, because that's when the people who didn't go out in daylight try to go get the things no one guarded at night. I don't know if it's fear of being seen or a habit we developed too fast to notice. Either way, lock your doors before the sun touches the tops of the cottonwoods. If you have a car, back it into the drive so the battery faces the house and a jump line is short. If you have no car, keep the heaviest piece of furniture near the door that sticks. If you're alone, put a pair of boots by the entrance anyway, even if they're not your size. Make your life look crowded. I keep thinking about the first official silence. It was a Thursday afternoon. There had been a press thing scheduled at the State Building, and the notice was the bare kind that always means nothing good. Update on regional infrastructure. We waited with the stream open on a laptop that dies if you tilt it. It cut out twice and came back with the same frozen frame of a seal on a blue cloth. Then after a long nothing, a short clip. A person at a podium, no name tag, no small talk, no voice you could place. They said we're working with partners and asked for patience and said to avoid unnecessary travel, and then looked off camera like they were supposed to say more, and someone shook their head. The clip ended with a motion blur, like a door half closed. I never saw it again. The next day, the TV channels were bars and tone, and some stayed bars, no tone, and that is worse. You can sleep through tone. You can't sleep through a bright stripe of color that reminds you there is a world somewhere with a signal that would be happy to speak if only the mouth knew how. Someone I'll call R sent a typed letter because the mail still moves, just slower and sadder. He said he works in a place with thick doors in the bluffs by the river, and he said the phrase, continuity office, and then scratched it out and wrote planning room on top. He said there are maps there with pins that move. He said some of the pins represent food warehouses, and some represent power yards, and some represent clinics that still have enough diesel to run a shift. He said the pins have different heads, blue for public, yellow for private, red for don't knock unless you have a reason and a badge. He said the red pins are multiplying. He said there are people at the planning room who argue about whether to make an announcement about the truth or to keep people calm and maybe alive. He said he is not a high person, but he can see the high people are tired. He said the question they keep asking is, what do we gain by telling them what we don't know? He didn't answer his own question. He did say the roads east of Des Moines are worse than here, and to tell anyone with family out that way to stop on this side and wait for a better day. I haven't told you about the night the sirens started and didn't stop. Not tornado sirens, not the kind we know by heart and can hum, but the pole-mounted public address horns that sat quiet by schools for a generation. They woke up like they had a nightmare and didn't know how to turn it off. For 2 hours, they played a loop that had words squeezed under static. A female voice with the shape of a warning, but only some of the letters. I caught shelter and boil and maintain, and a street name that doesn't exist here, which makes me think the feed was meant for somewhere else, and they pushed it broad just to hit someone. After that, the horn slept again. And now, when I walk past one on my way to the river to look at the ice making its first skin, I feel like I should say sorry to it for leaving it alone so long, then asking so much from it in one night. There are tiny bright things too, and I'm going to name them, because if we don't say them out loud, they don't help. A bar on Vinton that never caught a break turned into a soup line 2 days ago. You knock twice with your knuckles and they hand you a styrofoam cup filled with something that tastes like everything you ever ate when you were broke. A boy at the corner of 5th and Pierce set up a card table with a hand-lettered sign that says phone charge, pedal power, 2 minutes per bar, and he will let you pedal if you can't pay. An old bus driver in Bellevue is running a route that isn't a route, a loop from the apartments by the old Kmart to the church with the big roof, picking up anyone who lifts a hand. A woman in my building sits on the first stair with a Fisher-Price flashlight and points it at your feet so you don't trip. She told me she wants to hold the light in a dark place at least once a day so she can remember what it feels like to be useful. On frequency 7.065, somewhere toward the coast, because I can hear the salt in his voice, a man read out a list of stations still alive between Portland and San Diego. I wrote them down. I taped them to the window that faces east, because I want the first thing the sun hits in here to be names I can call at night. If you can hear me on 6.990, fading in and out with the static that sounds like rain on a highway, send me your call sign on the half-minute. I'll be listening on the second half. If you are a person without letters and numbers after your name, say your name and count to 5, and I will say your name back to you if the sky lets me. I am not the weather. I am just a voice, but I can be a handle on a door that keeps swinging. I owe you a truth that I've been circling like a dog meeting a new friend. I am tired. I am not a hero. My hands shake when the generator coughs. I have eaten more cold beans than any man should, and yes, I can still taste the metal. I dream about the way the station used to sound when the auto mixer kicked in at night, when the songs lined up like cars at a light, and everyone knew their turn. I dream about the shopping cart hum of a big box store. I dream about my sister, who left for Phoenix and said she'd call me from a pool. I have not heard from her in 6 days. I keep wanting to make a joke about the desert not needing power to be hot, but my mouth won't do it. There's a thin place in me where jokes used to live. I think it will grow back. I think it will, because yesterday, when I was outside clearing ice from the dish with a mitten and a spatula, a kid rode by on a skateboard wearing gloves and a hat and a grin, and he said, "Hey, radio man." And then he did a little hop over a crack he should have walked around, and it looked ridiculous and perfect, like the city refusing to fall all the way down. I want to share something a medic told me from the back of an SUV that still smells like a hospital, even though it's been parked outside for a week. He said, "People are coming in with carbon monoxide headaches because they're running grills in garages and kerosene heaters that were never made for living rooms." He said if you have a can heater, crack the window and put a basin of water nearby and set a battery alarm if you have one. He said, look at the flame color. If it's yellow and lazy, stop. He said the quiet deaths are the ones we'll regret the most. He also said he's seen a rise in cuts on hands from people opening cans with screwdrivers and rocks. Find a manual opener. If you can't, tap the rim all the way around with the back of a spoon and press the top with your thumb until it sighs, then pry. He said, tell them we can't afford to waste blood. There's less of it around than we think. On the political front, I know that phrase feels like a relic. Someone told me the governor's office in 2 states west is being run from a basement with a camping lantern and 3 people who rotate naps. I don't know if that's true, but it sounds like a thing that could be. There was a clip out of a city hall somewhere south where a mayor announced a curfew, and then the lights went out in the room, and you could hear someone whisper, "Say the time anyway." And he did, which is the bravest thing I've heard from a suit in years. Curfews only work if the night is different from the day. Here, the night is the day with worse visibility. If you're listening and you hold any kind of authority, make your rules simple and human. Bring your neighbors inside after dark. Share water with the person on your left. Don't shoot at shapes. If it's not yours, don't take it. If it's yours and you don't need it today, give it to someone who does. Written laws are asleep. Only the ones we carry work right now. I'm looking at the needle on the fuel tank. It moves more when it's cold, which feels like a trick but isn't. We have enough for the morning and maybe the day if the wind doesn't pick up and make the gen head grunt. I'm going to stay on until 9, then cut to a low-power loop that repeats the basics: water, warmth, coordination points. If the loop goes quiet, wait 30 minutes and try again. It might be a refuel. It might be me knocking ice out of a vent. It might be me down on the floor saying a prayer I never learned as a child. If you have shoes on, take them off before you sleep. Your body needs to know it's still safe somewhere. If you have socks, warm them on your belly before you put them on. If you have a friend, sit shoulder to shoulder while you eat. Skin learns fast and forgets slow. We have time for 2 more voices before the sun climbs behind that low gray lid. Here's Malachi from Sioux City. He says his grandma kept an old radio with a handle that smelled like rubber, and when the power went, she put it on the table and said, "We're not alone today," like she was naming a holiday. He says their block is trading chores by chalk marks on the sidewalk. A broom means sweep front steps. A pot means bring soup at noon. A star means sing at the corner at 6, and he laughs because nobody can sing and it still helps. He says he found an old police scanner in a box, and now he listens to voices that don't know they're being brave. He says if anyone out there wears a badge, thank you for the late nights, even if the line at the station looks like a story that will never end. He says he can see breath inside his house, and it looks like ghosts arguing. He says, sorry for being strange. I tell him it's not strange. I tell him it's life. Last one before the break loop. A whisper from a man who doesn't say his name, north of the city by the river bends. He says he was told to watch a fence, and at 2 in the morning, he saw a line of red lights move slow across the field and then stop, like a snake deciding whether to cross a road. He says he waited. He says he could feel the cold in his teeth. He says after 5 minutes, the lights blinked off and then on again in a different pattern. 3 quick, 2 slow, 1 long, and then the line turned south and drifted away. He says he's not sure if he saw trucks or something else. He says he's not sure what the fence is for anymore. I say if you see lights moving like that, don't chase them. I say light is a kind of bait now. I say if you're guarding something and you don't know why, decide whether the something is worth your skin. Sometimes letting go is survival. Sometimes standing is. Only you know your street. I can feel the room getting quieter in a way that has nothing to do with sound. That's the hour passing us by. I'm going to read the basics one more time before I pivot to the low-power loop. Conserve batteries, treat water, heat small spaces, not big ones. Check on the person who hasn't come out yet. Tie a ribbon to the door you've searched so others don't waste steps. Write times on your wrist with a marker so you don't lose the day. If you have a radio, leave it off except at the top of the hour and on the half for half a minute. If you find a signal, share it in chalk on the sidewalk where the melt will wipe it clean when the weather turns. If you have to travel, leave a note on the table telling where, when, who, and why. If you feel a panic rising like a wave, count breaths, 5 in, 5 out, then drink water. This is Mason on AM 1, 130 and 6.990. Megahertz, Council Bluffs, still here. If you have a thought that keeps you up, speak it to the wall. If you have a story, save it for the afternoon when I'm back up full and the lines are less crowded with ghosts. If you have nothing left, sit in the morning with your hands around a cup and watch the day arrive like a stranger you might become friends with. We're not done. I'll be back after 9. Hold fast. If you can't hold fast, hold something. If you can't hold something, breathe and count. And let the world be small until it can be big again. It's 9:07 a.m. The light outside is flat and colorless like a sheet of paper taped over the sky, and the wind has eased but left the air raw. The diesel took after I bled the line and coaxed the bubbles out with a wrench I thought I'd lost last spring. The loop ran while I worked. If you heard it stutter, that was my glove slipping off the primer bulb. This is still Mason on AM 1130 and shortwave 6.990 megahertz, with the backup on 6.986 if the fading gets ugly. If you're using a crank radio, take turns with someone. 15 minutes on is enough for an hour of standby. If you are alone, crank in short bursts, then rest your hands. I'm seeing frost like salt crystals creeping along the inside of the double-pane window. Somewhere a dog is barking the same 2 barks every 30 seconds, which means nobody has answered yet. If that's your dog, call him in. You don't want strangers learning your rhythms. Between the hours I was down and now, something changed in the river sound. It's lower, like it swallowed a stone. I walked to the chain link at the edge of our lot and tried to smell what the wind was carrying, and it was a mix of wet earth and cold iron. On the far bank, one of the big office buildings near the old market is running a generator that skips every few breaths, and when it skips, the streetlights flicker for a heartbeat and then surrender, and in that pulse, you can see shadows step forward and back like people deciding what to do. They'll learn soon not to move on the skip. The skip is a trap. It makes you think your body should hurry. It shouldn't. Wait for steady light or walk by touch. We had a courier stop by the back door just after I brought the boards up again. He wore a brown jacket with the logo torn off and carried a canvas bag with a lock that didn't lock. He said he was making his final rounds, words I don't think any delivery man wants to say, and he handed me a stack of letters bound with 2 rubber bands and a note from the depot that asked me to read them on air if I could. I'll read pieces of them later, names trimmed, places kept, because places matter. The bag smelled like dust and winter apples. He said there were 3 more bags on his route, and then he was going home to see if the little propane heater he found in a storage locker would work without killing him. I told him to crack a window high and a window low and to tie a ribbon to his wrist if he planned to nap, not because it does anything real, but because waking up and seeing the ribbon reminds you to check your head for weight and your mouth for dry. He nodded like a man taking down a recipe. He took a peanut butter packet from the box by our door and said, "This is the good stuff," and jogged down the steps like a boy. Calls are stacked. I'm going to take them as they come, and I'll flag anything that sounds like a pattern. If you're on shortwave, remember the net check on the half minute. If you're on AM, you'll hear me slightly delayed in some parts of the city because of the way the ground wave runs around the hills. Trust your ears, not the echo. This is Irene from Carter Lake. She says the convenience store by the east side hung a sign that says, "Cash only," but when people lined up with bills and coins, the clerk looked scared and said the safe wouldn't open, and the till wouldn't open, and the drop was full, and the manager had the codes. She said a man tried to hand the clerk a 20 over the glass, and the clerk lifted his palms like surrender, and said, "I can't take it unless the drawer opens because the camera will still log it." And then he remembered, there is no camera, or if there is, nobody is watching on the other end. Irene said she watched him make the choice to break a rule and take money to hand bread. She said he took the money like it burned and stuffed it in a paper bag, and wrote numbers on the bag with a Sharpie and slid it under the counter. She said when she left, he was still writing. That's a man trying to keep a shape to his day so he can live with himself tomorrow. If you run a store, you can do this too. Write it down. Even if the numbers go nowhere now, they may go somewhere later. And in the meantime, the numbers will keep you honest with your neighbors. Here's Tyler on a shaky line from Papillion. He says last night around 2, he heard a high whine, not like a drone, more like a belt on a car that's wet, and then saw a pulse of light crawl along the power lines behind his house. Blue-white, crawling, not jumping, slow like a caterpillar. He says once it reached the pole, the transformer made a soft pop and then a sound like a sigh, and the whole block went dark in a way that looked ashamed. He asked if that means the grid is done there. I told him it might mean the line tripped and the local equipment is protecting itself, or it might mean something upstream is sick, and the transformer took the hit to keep worse from traveling. He asked if he should pour water on it. Number: no water anywhere near broken electric. Keep kids away. Keep yourself away. If you see wire on the ground, do not try to move it with a stick. Distance is your friend. 10 steps. 20 if you can. If you must mark it, put a trash can over it so cars swerve. If you see a fire at the pole base, that's wood, not oil. If it's oil, you'll smell it sweet and heavy. Either way, call it out to your block and back off. We got a brief patch-in from someone calling herself Finch, which I know as a handle from a tech forum back when those still had servers that didn't time out. She said she's in a windowless room under a building that used to hold 8 floors of startups, and now holds 30 people and a hot plate. She said there was a meeting on a secure line at dawn with 3 other cities in the Midwest. She said all 3 reported a ghost load, a phrase that made my skin raise, meaning the system shows power flowing to places that are physically disconnected. She said one city tried to chase the ghost by opening breakers in a pattern, and the pattern echoed back to them, as if someone else was mirroring their moves with a delay. She said they stopped when a feeder warmed up too fast to be natural. She said not to romanticize this. She said it like a plea. She said if anyone out there used to be in industrial controls and you still have a clean bench and a meter, call your local water plant and power yard and ask what they need you to test by hand. She said, manual work might be the only work that matters. If you're out there, Finch, and you're sleeping under fluorescent bulbs you can't turn off, take a scarf and tie it over your eyes and give your mind a version of dark. Drink water that's not coffee. Your body will thank you, even if your heart won't yet. There's a rumor circling like a hawk, and I need to handle it without feeding it. People are saying the river has something in it. People are saying the color is wrong and that fish are floating by the boat launch, bellies up, eyes milky, and people are filming until their phones die. I walked down to the chain link and looked. The water is cold and moving and looks like river water looks on a gray day. That does not mean it is safe. Upstream, treatment plants are running blind or running hot or not running at all, which means whatever your grandparents told you about taking water straight from a river because it's God's tap is a story for better years. If you must pull from the river, pull from the middle, not the shore. Let it sit. Filter through cloth to pull grit. Boil if you can. If you can't boil, use a few drops of plain unscented bleach per liter. Stir, wait wait 30 minutes. If you don't have bleach, build a filter column with sand and charcoal and a sock. It will not kill the small things. It will make the water more like water and less like the river. A man on the north side showed me a stack of coffee filters and asked if they were enough. They are not enough alone. Use them as the top layer of something slower. I want to talk about silence because it's changing. At first, silence was shock. Then it was rationing. Now there is a new silence that feels like a choice. People are choosing not to call people they love because they don't want to pass on fear. I understand that. I've done it. I have not dialed my sister today because I am afraid of hearing nothing. But here's the thing. Speak to them anyway, even if you cannot reach them. Say their names out loud while you do the small work of the day. It puts a shape back in your chest. It steadies your hands. If you do not have someone to speak to, say my name, and I'll carry it on this frequency until it finds you again. I am no priest. I am a man with chapped lips and a mic. But names matter. They're anchors in a tide. A sheet of paper in the courier bag has a stamp from a clinic in Council Bluffs that is still open afternoons. The doctor who signed it asked me to read this. If you are on insulin, your dose will change if you are cold and eating less. Test if you can. If you cannot test, cut your dose by a small amount and watch your breath and your hands. If you get sleepy and your mouth dries, you may be high. If you shake and sweat and your heart hits hard, you may be low. Honey on the tongue can pull you up for a minute. A half slice of bread can hold you there. Friends, neighbors. Check on the people who jab themselves at dawn and dusk. They are carrying a quiet burden that cold makes heavier. There is also a note about inhalers. Warm them in your pocket before you use them. The medicine hits better when the valve isn't frozen. Simple things. Life things. Theories continue to flood in, and I'm going to sift without getting lost. A former contractor from Offutt says there are birds on the runway and not enough jet wash to scare them. He says that means fewer flights, not none, but fewer. A woman who once typed up budgets for a rail yard says there are boxcars parked on a siding that usually turns over twice a day, and she can read the chalk on the couplers, and it says, "Hold a man in a small town an hour north, says the sheriff held a meeting in a gym and said out loud, 'We are on our own until we hear different.'" That is a theory that is also a truth. A recording from a marine radio channel somewhere on the Missouri carried a voice that said, "Locks remain shut until further notice," which means moving bulk material by river is paused. You can build a picture with these bricks. It's not pretty. It is honest. Let me bring in Ruth out of Red Oak. She says she's 72, and she sleeps in a chair because her hip is bad and her bed is cold. She says last night, 2 men knocked and asked if she had spare blankets. She said she lied and said no, even though there is a cedar chest with 6 inside. She cried on the phone for that lie. She asked me if she should feel shame. I told her she should feel human. 2 strangers at night asking for blankets is a story that ends in harder questions. Shame is a luxury. We will earn it back when there is surplus again. Until then, when you say no, say it like you are choosing life. And if you have extra and you know who you can trust, give quietly and in daylight. Put the blanket on the doorknob and ring once and walk away. Radio realism for the new listeners. If you're hearing me on 6.990 fade like a wave, that's the ionosphere changing as the day warms. Tilt your antenna if you can, even if it's a string of wire thumbtacked along the wall. If you're on AM and you get whistle tones like a kettle in the background, that's interference from a neighbor's inverter. or a generator with a lousy regulator. Move your radio across the room. Your body is an antenna. Stand near the set and raise your hand. You might pull the signal in with your skin. If your set takes an external antenna, a single length of wire, 12 feet or so, run it along the floor, not the ceiling. Floors catch less noise. If you're under a metal roof, try the window frame. If you only have a phone, put it face down and let the battery rest. A dead phone is a photo album you can't open. I want to tell you about Hal, because he came up the stairs like a ghost carrying a box labeled mixers and a thermos that smelled like cinnamon. Hal is the part-time engineer who keeps this old place honest. He's the one who told me never to trust a cable that looks new. He sat on a milk crate and said he'd just come from a strip mall where the nail salon is now a charging station with a power strip that runs off a car battery that a man in the parking lot is saving by idle throttling his pickup every 20 minutes. He said people take turns plugging in, 5 minutes each, and they timer it with a kitchen clock. He said he saw no arguing, just the small shame of people pulling a device out of a pocket that used to hold their life. Hal then opened the box and pulled out a ribbon of old patch cords and said, "We're going to future-proof this by going backwards." He put the board in a half-manual mode so that if the automation dies, I can still push a slider and make a voice go. If you can, future-proof by going backwards. Get the hand tools out. Find the manual map of your city. Draw one if you can't find it. There's a letter with a sketch of a star, and inside the star, a list of names with little notes like 2x blankets, slow kettle, cough, likes, crossword, and I realize it's a map of an apartment floor drawn by a girl. Names replaced with the things that matter right now, and the star is the stairwell where someone keeps a candle at dusk. That's world building you can hold. If you live in a stack of homes, do this. Not to blame, to remember, to learn who sleeps and who wakes and who needs knocks at noon. A man in Bellevue asks about martial law. He says a buddy sent a photo of a paper on a pole with words like proclamation and curfew and trespass and penalty, but no seal, and the bottom had a smudge where a signature should be. He asks if he should believe it. Here is a rule for these days. If a rule arrives without a voice you recognize and a place to ask a question, hold it in your mind as possible, but do not shape your whole life around it yet. Real rules bring answers. Real rules bring a place to complain. Fake rules arrive like smoke and hope you'll cough and go inside. If a uniform stops you and speaks with clarity, listen. If a paper flaps and the phone numbers ring dead, use your judgment and your block's judgment. Block law will beat paper law until the wires knit again. We have a call from Doc on the old CB band, voice worn thin. He says there's an outbreak of stomach sickness on his side of town. He says it might be the thawed food people refroze. He says it might be the water they forgot to boil when they were tired. He says he's out of the good stuff that stops the flood and only has a handful of packets left. He says if you come to his place with sharp pain, he will send you to the church. But if you come with slow cramps and tired eyes, he will give you rice and salt and instructions. So here they are for anyone who can't get to him. 1 liter of clean water, 6 level teaspoons of sugar, half a level teaspoon of salt. Stir until clear, sip slow. If you have a lemon, a squeeze helps. If you have zinc tablets, they help more. If a child is listless, do not wait to see if they will perk up. Fluids, fluids, fluids. Sit with them. Tell a story. Stories make the sips go down. We need to talk about fuel, not gasoline. diesel for the bigger generators and the heating oil people called number 2 last winter when bills were a gripe, not a sentence. There are trucks parked at the edge of town with full tanks, but no drivers cleared to move. There are tanks in basements that were half full when the first cold came and now sit like captive sons. If you run a place that keeps people alive, clinic, shelter, signal, and you have an honest way to barter for a top-up, do it in the open. Meet at noon. Bring a notary public if you can find one with a stamp. Not because the stamp gets you fuel now, but because it reminds everyone this is a world with future memory. If you're the one with the pump, don't let the desperate bleed you dry. Make the trade, write the paper, keep a ledger, ask for a guard to stand beside you, 2 hours only, then stop. Schedule the next. Scarcity makes bad friends. Schedules make better ones. Shortwave net check at 30 brought a voice from somewhere near Wichita with a theory that isn't a theory so much as a rhythm. He says every night between 1 and 3, his neighbor's solar inverter chirps in a pattern like a bird. 3 chirps, pause, 2 chirps, long whine, no sun, no batteries worth bragging about. But still, the chirp. He says he put an ear to the metal box and felt it vibrate under his jaw. He says when the chirp happens, his small AM radio loses the low stations and catches the high ones better. If you're a radio head, you know what that suggests about noise and sky and reflections. If you're not, here's what it means. Machines are still trying to speak. Some of them are speaking to the sky by accident. Some are crying for a handshake. Pull the breakers on anything that chirps in the night if you can, and see if the neighborhood gets calmer in a way you can feel. Report back. We're building a map of the hum. I've been putting off talking about the jail because I don't want to get it wrong. A guard called in on a borrowed phone and said they had to choose which doors to open when the generators hiccuped. He said they opened the ones with the sick and the ones with short timers and the ones who had people waiting in the parking lot for hours. He said they did not open the ones with heat on them. He said he saw a man walk into the cold with no coat and put his hands on his wife's face like he'd never seen cheeks before. If you saw more patrol cars in your neighborhood last night, that might be why. If you didn't, it might be because those cars are parked sideways in front of a building with gray walls, so the night feels watched. If one of those men on the lawn is yours now, feed him if you can, and ask him to help watch when the dark comes. People given a chance to help usually do. Okay. My hands are warmer now. That means I can tell you how it really felt at dawn when I hit the starter and the engine coughed twice, and on the third cough, I heard a sound I haven't heard since last summer. A train horn, low and far, down by the river. 2 longs and a short, the old crossing rhythm. It cut through the cold like a promise. It told me that steel still meets steel somewhere, and someone still holds a lever and pulls, and a sound travels across fields and up our street. I stood still and let the horn pass through me. If you heard it too, let it be your proof that we are not done. Not yet. Now the mail. The first letter is from a 5th floor in a brick building on Park Avenue. The writer lists the apartments around her. The lady with the small dog who laughs like a hiccup. The man who wears a tie to take out the trash. The twins who sleep on the pullout and ask why the light is broken. She says she put a note in the hall asking who has a camp stove, who has a water pot, who has a radio, who has a Bible, who has a deck of cards, who has a story to trade for a bowl of soup. She drew boxes next to each. She says by nightfall, the boxes had names. She says the twins' father drew a box that said guitar and wrote his name. She says she had forgotten how many people know a song. If you live in a stack, do this. Make the boxes simple. Instruments count as heat when the night is long. Another letter is short and angry in a way that made me nod. Stop telling us to boil water when there is no gas and no power and no wood that isn't wet. You're right. Boiling is a word that sounds easy when you have a knob to turn. If you have no stove, collect candles. 3 under a pot on a rack will make steam. It takes time. Time hates us, but we can still beat it by starting early. If you have a grill and a porch and a neighbor with a grill and a porch, pull them together and make a windbreak with trash cans and wet towels and take turns keeping the flame alive. If you have dry books, you don't need. Tear the dull ones in half and roll them tight with a pencil and tape and make logs that will burn long enough to heat a kettle. The world will keep the good words. The phone book is not holy. The glossy ads are kindling. If you have none of that, cold settle, charcoal filter, bleach. I won't lie to you and say it's enough. I will tell you it's better than thirst. We have an insider note that I almost didn't read because it's the kind of thing that makes teeth chatter when you're warm. It says, certain labs are off the grid by design, and they are fine. It says, the problem is the supply chain to the people who clean the labs and feed the people who work in them and take out the trash at night. It says, a clean room gets dirty very fast when the world outside pushes up against the glass. It says, if you live near a place with a fence and a door with a card reader and no windows and a parking lot with 2 cars instead of 20, leave them alone. They are in a fight with microbes that do not care about our drama. Do not compete for their resources. Do not shine lights at their windows. Be their quiet neighbor. Later, they will be yours. I am going to take 2 more voices before I cut to a shorter loop while I check the oil in my own head. Here's Keon from Benson, breathless, says they organized a watch last night with whistles. Every house that had a whistle hung it by the door. If you saw something, you blew once for look and twice for help, and 3 for call more people. He says it turned into music at one point because kids like to test patterns. He says at 2 a.m., a truck rolled slow with no lights and someone blew twice, and the block woke like a hive, and the truck drove on. He says they laughed after because it felt like a game they won without playing. He says someone baked bread in a roasting pan over charcoal. He says the street smelled like a fair. He says he slept on the floor by the door with his boots on and felt safe for 3 hours, which is more than he's had all week. And Amy in La Vista, whispering because her baby sleeps on her chest. She says the baby stopped crying when the fridge went quiet because the hum had been the enemy for a month. She says she misses the hum now because it meant there was cold and milk and ice for her wrist. She says her husband walked to his brother's 5 miles away and came back with a wagon with a broken wheel and a bag of rice. She says they will live on rice and hope. She asks me if hope goes bad. I tell her it doesn't, but it does sink if you put it in a jar and don't open it. Use it. Spread it thin like butter. It tastes better that way. I'm going to set the set to a soft loop with the must-knows for 15 minutes. If it cuts out, count to 60 and wait. It might be me knocking ice from the louver, or just needing to stand in the doorway and watch the street to remember there is a world beyond these walls. When I come back, I'll read more letters, share the grain distribution points that were chalked on the old gym wall on 8th Street before the chalk ran out, and I'll tell you what the man in the camouflage jacket said about the train horn, because he claimed he could read it like weather. Keep the radio close, but not on your lap. Take a drink of water right now if you forgot this morning. Breathe slow. Count your breaths. Put your name on a piece of paper and tape it to the inside of your door. Not for the worst. For the neighbor who comes to knock and needs to know what to say when you answer. I'm still here. Stay with me. It's 9:46 a.m. The clouds look like a bruise stretched across the whole sky. And the kind of light coming through the glass isn't really light at all. More like a reminder that the sun still exists somewhere above the sheet. The air in here is heavy with kerosene from a heater that coughed once and then settled, and my voice feels dry even after drinking from the dented thermos by my side. This is Mason Reed, still on AM 1130, still pushing signal out on 6.990 megahertz with the fallback at 6.986 if I vanish for you. If you've been twisting the dial and landed here by accident, stay a while. What you hear might keep you steady when the ground shifts. The last 20 minutes were full of small sounds that didn't belong together. The groan of a truck braking on the bridge with no cars behind it. The whistle of air through broken glass 2 blocks east. And then, out of nowhere, the distant crack of something collapsing, followed by silence so absolute it pressed on my ears. I keep thinking it was a billboard giving up in the wind, or maybe the roof of one of those hollow warehouses near the interstate. But there's a weight to it. The kind of sound you don't forget because it makes the air lean in your direction. If you heard it too, you're not imagining things. Something big gave up. Now, about the grain. Before the break, I promised I'd share the chalk marks left on the gym wall at 8th Street. Someone, probably one of the volunteers who never left after the Red Cross folded, kept a running list of where the last shipments landed. They drew arrows on the brick with the side of the chalk because the sticks wore down too fast. What I copied down says, Crescent Hall, Tuesday, half load, beans and flour. South Depot, Wednesday, full load, cornmeal, sugar, oil, small cans of peaches. Franklin Field, Friday, uncertain, rice only. The chalk trailed off after that. That wall might already be washed by rain, but if you're close to any of those 3, you know where to check. Don't go alone. Don't go after dark. If you bring cash, bring small. If you bring trade, carry it in plain sight. Desperation grows teeth. I need to tell you about the man in camouflage who showed up here just after dawn. He didn't come inside, just stood by the chain link and tapped the metal with one finger until I walked out. He said he'd spent years listening to trains and that the horn I mentioned earlier wasn't random. It was code. He said 2 longs and a short isn't just a crossing warning. It's also a signal some conductors use to tell the yards that they're alive but running light. He said if that's true, then the train I heard was moving without cargo, just the engine. Maybe a crew trying to test the rails or reposition. He said it means someone's still fighting to keep the steel alive, even if the loads aren't moving. He told me to listen tonight for a double short after the long. It would mean they're turning back. I don't know if that's true, or if it's a story a lonely man tells himself in the dark. But I'll be listening. If you hear horns, write them down. The rhythm might matter. Letters from the courier bag keep staring at me. Here's one, short, written in a hand that shook. The radio is the only voice we trust now. We are 3 in this house. 2 old, 1 small. The small one asks why the cartoons won't turn on. We tell him the cartoons are on vacation. Please tell us when vacation ends. If you're listening, family on 24th Street, I can't tell you when the vacation ends. I can only tell you that the signal in your hand right now is proof that not every channel has gone quiet. Keep your boy warm. Tell him stories in the shape of cartoons. He won't remember the difference later. He'll just remember your voice. We've had whispers of martial law, and I've avoided giving them weight until I saw the paper taped to a post near the station door. No seal, no contact number, just bold letters saying, "Curfew, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Violators detained." I don't know who put it there. I don't know if there are people to enforce it. What I know is that the streets after dark are no place for wandering. Whether the order is real or fake doesn't change that. Stay in after dusk. Candles low, windows covered. Move slow if you must move. The dark belongs to ears, not eyes. We're getting closer to noon, and I can feel the day stretching in front of us like a road with no signs. I'll keep this line open until the diesel drops, then switch to the loop again while I climb to the roof and clear ice from the antenna. Keep the small rules alive. Drink water, mark your time, speak names out loud, knock for your neighbors. This is Mason on 1130 and 6.990. You are still here. I am still here. That counts.